takes a snap out of the shotgun. Look, he's just going to crank up, hang it way up in the air into the end zone. Everybody up, and it's batted out of the end zone by a Seahawk defender.
I'll make you mad. Least I ain't sneezing. I'm just trying to put the water right. If you want to, I'll take you out. And I got the feeling that I'm gonna keep you up, gonna keep you up, gonna keep you up all night.
Welcome everybody to a special pregame insomnia podcast interview with Danny Kelly. Say hello, Danny.
What's going on, Seahawk fans?
So, rather than just do the typical football podcast where we talk a bunch of football information and just give you something, very football-centric, I wanted to give you a little more of a personal interview with the guy that basically, is Atlas at field goals. He holds the world up on his shoulders and carries us through. And for the last, 4 years now?
Yeah, I think it's about 4 years or so. I was wondering that this morning too, actually. But I think, it started in
2011.
Yeah, 2011. And crazy. It's almost fourth season.
Yeah.
Fifth season.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah, it really does, because I started thinking about that, and I was like, I was trying to remember, because you came on pretty much right after the 2010 season wrapped up.
Yeah.
Of course, John Morgan stepped down, and so before we get into all that, because we will get to that, I have notes and everything. I wanted to talk about, there's that first sports memory, that first mark in your life that connects you to sports. So maybe you could tell us a bit about, what's the biggest first thing you remember about sports that kind of brought you in, connected you to it?
About sports in general or about the Seahawks?
Yeah, just sports in general.
That's a good question. So I played basketball all growing up. That was like my sport. So I think I started probably in first or second grade or something like that, and just got really into it. And then I played it in high school, and that kind of just got me into the sport world, because doing high school basketball, you're practicing 5-6 days a week. You have 2 games a week. It's really pretty intense, and so. Most of my friends ended up you end up being friends with people that are on the team, and that was kind of my introduction to sports. And then when I went to college, I didn't play at all the first 2 years, and then I had a bunch of roommates that were playing football at PLU, and they kind of talked me into trying out for the team there because they have open, you could walk on. So I had never played football in my life. And I just decided that it'd be fun to try and go out and make the team. And so I worked out all summer, and I ended up making the team. But I just really had no idea what I was doing. Which that's whenever these for instance, this rugby guy that's changing to the NFL. I just feel like rugby's similar, but there's just so many nuances to the game of football that it's going to take him a long time to figure all that stuff out. And that's kind of how I felt. Going into the PLU football program, I was just kind of running around and had no idea what defenses were going on or really what I was playing.
Right.
But that was definitely a good foundation for football writing, though, because you understand what it feels like to get hit. You understand what it feels like to try and tackle. You understand how difficult it is to I played corner, so I definitely have a soft spot for cornerbacks just because I understand how hard it is to try and match up with a receiver who's running right at you and knows exactly where he's going. It's just so hard, and so I think that playing kind of gave me a really good appreciation for how hard the sport is.
Right.
And that kind of, I think that appreciation for the technical aspect of the game is kind of like where my X's and O's focus came from, because it's just it's one of those sports that you can't just pick up really quickly.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the background. And then, after I graduated, I did some different jobs and then randomly started writing about football and got picked up by SB Nation.
We'll definitely get to that.
Okay.
Because I'm really interested in it. But when did you follow your first sports team, and what caused you to pick that team?
I was really into the Sonics when I was growing up. My dad and he would get 7-game packages back in the day when you could buy, ticket packages, and we would go to 7 games every season. And I was just obsessed with basketball growing up, and so, that was the Kemp and Peyton era, and that was really my first sort of obsession in terms of sports, following those teams and getting really into it. And then I never really got into the Seahawks until, the 2005 season, which is, so you can call me a bandwagoner if you like, but that was kind of when I switched from being a basketball fan to a hardcore football fan. In fact, I kind of made fun of my roommates in college because they were so obsessed with football. And so now when they see me doing what I'm doing now, they think it's hilarious that I'm actually, so obsessed with football, because I would always complain about them constantly having football on. I was like, God,
how do you watch that? It takes so long for anything to happen.
I used to, because they would put on college football on a Saturday and literally sit there from 9 in the morning until 11 at night watching football, and it would piss me off.
Oh, I know, because I live that way. I mean, my weekends are shot.
Yeah.
I always tell people, look, if you're dying, you can call me. But if you're not dying, don't call me. It's football.
Exactly. So now, they think I'm funny that, I'm probably the most into football of any of them now, even though those guys were 5-year players for PLU and super obsessed with football. Now I'm the one who's the most into it. It's pretty funny how that kind of happened.
Okay, so now that we've laid that kind of background out, how did you decide to become a sports writer on the internet?
I try to think back of when I decided to start writing a blog. I don't really know my decision, where it came from. It was just kind of this random thing where it was an outlet to, it was an outlet for my obsession, I guess you could say. Putting all my thoughts on paper, more or less, and I think that's probably where most bloggers start. So it was basically just I was really always thinking about it, always reading about it, so I might as well put some of my thoughts down and started up a blog. And it was only going for a couple months, I think, before John stepped down, and then the SB Nation or whatever was doing a search, and I guess they found me. I want to say maybe Rob Staten from Seahawks Draft Blog had recommended my name, but I can't really remember exactly how that all went down. But yeah, so I kind of just went in blind. I hadn't really read Field Goals all that much before I started, which is kind of funny. But I mean, I'd read it, but not I wasn't a
You
regular.
weren't religious.
Right, I wasn't a regular there or anything. I'd never commented.
Right.
So I kind of just came out. I was from the blue, more or less, and it was, it was a trial by fire.
Well, that makes it all the more impressive that you kind of, got in there and didn't seem to miss a beat. The site didn't.
Well,
but
yeah, I appreciate it.
Now,
I really just I had no. I don't even feel like there is a pre-Field Goals for me. I feel like Field Goals was my start in blogging, which is a little bit weird, but
right.
I think it was only
starting at the top because they're the highest ranked football blog on the internet, I think.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think it was definitely I went in naive, and that's probably for the best because as you know, like writing on the internet can open you up to a lot of criticism. And I think when I first started, I took it a little too seriously in terms of like if someone said anything negative about one of your points, it's like you're sitting there like trying to come up with, yeah, like arguing with random people on the internet. It's not really going to get you very far. I mean, at some point, it turns from a good discussion where it's productive and enriching or whatever, but then I really just despise arguing with people about stuff on the internet. It's just like a total waste of time to me. But
it is.
So, yeah.
But now for me, that makes our early conversations through email make a lot more sense. Like, because I was like, why is he looking to me to do anything? Like when you first came to me about some of the historical fan posts I had done, and then you were like, I want to give you front page privileges because I need people that know more about this team than maybe I do. And I was like, I don't think I know that much. So,
and that's one of the cool things about field goals. Honestly, when I first started, I would read the comments and I'd be like, what are these guys talking about? I need to freaking figure out, I need to like learn way more about football, because they were talking about 4-3 under, you know, the Leo and the responsibilities of a Leo and a 4-3 under, 4-3 over, and the differences and blah blah. And it was like all Greek to me at that point, and I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm talking about, or else I'm gonna look like an idiot. And then when I found you, I remember you were writing a lot of stuff about the Seahawks in the 80s and 90s and even earlier, and I still basically know nothing about Seahawks history other than what I've read of your stuff. I was not a fan back then. The only Seahawks game I remember going to was when I was probably in middle school, and my dad took me, and the point of going was to get Ronnie Lott's autograph, because my dad had a friend who was like, who knew Ronnie Lott. So we went to a Seahawks-Raiders game, or maybe it was the 49ers, I can't remember.
It could have been Raiders, because he went to the Raiders for like a couple years before he retired, I think.
I think it was when he was with the Raiders. It was later in his career. And so that's like my only NFL memory when I was growing up, more or less. I was like, my dad's a Nebraska fan, as a lot of people know. And so I watched Nebraska.
Wow.
I watched Nebraska college football growing up, and then, but I was never like super into it. I was into the Huskies for a while, you know, Husky football, but more or less I was a basketball fan, and then, you know, for a long time I was really into baseball because of fantasy baseball. I got it. It's funny because I was a hardcore fantasy baseball player for several years, and I was like anti-NFL fantasy. I was anti-fantasy football for a long time before I played it, and then I finally played it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And that was actually a big part of the reason I got into the NFL, was, you know, because of fantasy football. So I definitely don't like. I know there are people that are like anti-fantasy football, but to me, fantasy football is honestly the reason I got into the NFL, because I started, you know, paying attention to other teams and wanting to watch my players, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think it's a great conduit in making fans, and so I have nothing against it.
Well, it also helps you learn about the other players.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the NFL season is so compressed that you don't get to see all the teams, so you don't learn about a Cecil Shorts or, you know, except through fantasy football. So I'm just a fan in that sense, because I learned more about, you know, slot receivers than I ever wanted to know. I played fantasy football for like 3 years, and I just was never any good at it, so I stopped doing it. But I always appreciated that I could, you know, this was way back. Lavernius Coles was still playing wide receiver for the Jets.
I remember him, yeah.
Oh, I liked him because he always seemed to score a touch. Like, that was the one year I was actually good, and Lavernius Coles had a touchdown in like 3 consecutive games, and I'm like, I don't care that you're 34. Somehow you're doing these things.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a mentor or anything, did you? Kind of coming in.
I mean, not really. When I first started, I give a ton of credit to Rob and Kip Earlywine over at Seahawks Draft Blog, because they kind of we used to email and talk a lot when I first started at Field Goals, and they kind of helped me figure out how blogging works and all that. So those guys, I always owe them a debt of gratitude, because they kind of showed me the ropes and stuff like that, and I still love and read Rob's blog all the time, and he was on our podcast last week, so it's just cool to have grown in the blog community and all that, and still see that a lot of the guys are still going strong and still doing their thing, and I would definitely give a lot of credit to Rob and Kip. I don't think Kip writes there anymore very often, at least, but yeah, I would say if anyone, I would probably credit Rob as my first sort of mentor into the world of blogging.
Yeah, Rob does a fantastic job. I always try to get people to follow him on Twitter, because when he posts new blogs, it's like so exciting to sit down and read the stuff he has. Because he's the only guy I can follow in terms that does the real in-depth college analysis. Because I'm just completely compulsive. So if you give me a little bit of information, I have to take it and try to run with it, and I just go crazy with the amount of information you can get. And Rob always does such a good job of, providing a good outlet for that.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I got into blogging too, is because I was sort of reading all these blogs and starting to go down my own rabbit holes in terms of what these blogs were talking about. So I decided to start writing on my own too, and it's kind of just how I got going onto it.
And the internet remembers. I hope I can find some of those.
God, I would hate to read some of my early blogs. They're probably awful.
I can't read anything that I wrote in 2011 except the one, I think, where I took on the Dynasty lookbacks.
Yeah, they're not there anymore?
No, they're there. I just can't bear to look at them.
Yeah, that's how I feel, too, about my stuff. Oh, God. And it's funny, just because over the years your writing style sort of grows or changes or whatever. I bet my early stuff is just atrocious. Not that I'm a very good writer now, but...
well, you get more into a comfort zone of what you're capable of.
Yeah.
I would never dream of, telling people to do things a certain way, the way I do them, because that's what makes me the most comfortable and the most capable.
Yeah. And it takes a while to find your voice in writing, I think, and that was I hadn't really done much writing before that in any medium. Or at least in football, style writing at all. And so, I would hate to go back and read some of that stuff.
Well, I think I didn't notice a downtick in the capability of the content, but then I wasn't really looking that hard. I was just in shock when the transition happened. I was just like, John, what are you doing? I loved fighting with you about stuff.
Yeah, and his writing is so good. He's one of the best. He's one of the best. I would say he's probably one of the best sports writers in the world in terms of his writing. He's just an amazing writer. So following him was I basically just had to say, people aren't going to read me for my writing style. I just, you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's kind of maybe another reason I got into the X's and O's thing, because I knew that, I'm just at heart, I'm not a super eloquent writer.
Yeah. The
content is more really what I'm going for. So.
Yep. I gotcha. So we've talked all about it. We've talked about your background, but why did you decide to take this job? I mean, from your position, that would be nuts. Just as an aside, when you offered me front page privileges at the site, I was terrified. So what makes you go 2 months into your own just blogging, just as a, you know, on just the SB Nation side, I guess?
Yeah.
What makes you go ahead and step into the role at Field Goals?
Well, like I said, I kind of was not really in. I wasn't in deep in terms of I wasn't like a member of the community.
Right.
I wasn't even signed up for SB Nation. I think at the point where I took over at Field Goals, and so
Wow.
I think honestly, the only reason I did it was because I was too naive to know any better.
There you go.
And so if I had been like deeper into the culture, I probably maybe would have done something different. I don't really know at this point, but to me it was like I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
There you go.
But it turned out to be really fun. And like,
Yeah.
you know, there was I think it was a little bit difficult at first just because as a writer you have to learn how to take criticism and not get like
Right.
fired up about it. And that was I think
Right.
that was like the hard part for me.
Yeah.
Not like stewing on something that some commenter said, you know, like now I really honestly don't give a shit, but
Well, yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is to have a mute button. Not a thicker skin. People always tell you thicker skin. Thicker skin can eventually be wounded. A mute button for comments that aren't helpful is just huge.
yeah.
And then real legitimate criticism is always helpful. And
Oh,
never,
for sure.
never hurts. Like,
Yeah.
if it's good, you know, you're like, okay, I can take that and file it away.
And you know, talking about mentors, I had mentioned Rob. Another guy who really mentored me early on was Thomas Beakers. He's one of the main Field Goals, like old school guys. He's
Yeah,
kind of transitioned. He's doing a lot of journalism with video games and things now. So he hasn't been had the time to be around Field Goals as much. But he definitely, you know, he at first was kind of like, you know, I think when I came to the site, he was definitely, I don't know what the word to say. He didn't think that, or he thought it was going to be a big negative that
Yeah.
John was gone and some random dude who was taking over was kind of taking it in a different direction, and he like
Right.
ended up. At first, I was like, this guy's being a jerk, and then I was like, after I kind of like realized that criticism is helpful, he became like one of my top like confidants. You know, he would help me. He kind of helped me through and helped me find my style, and so that was huge. You know, he was he was definitely not afraid to like tell you when you're kind of writing something that was off base or
Yeah.
kind of like he didn't want Field Goals to be like PFT where it's just a bunch of news aggregation kind of thing. And
Yeah,
I think,
it's what we call clickbait now.
right. And so I at first I was like, you know, big part of it was just like, here's what's going on in the world, and I would just like regurgitate like news, and you know,
Yeah.
he was like very critical of that, and I credit him for, you know, saying that because, you know, I didn't even really realize what I was doing at that point, and so he
Because
kinda,
essentially you turn the audience off.
right. So he kind of he helped steer Field Goals a lot in that transition. So he deserves a lot of credit, I think, for that. And he's kind of like one of the old. He's like a godfather around Field Goals, and I really appreciated his
I'll make sure to let him know on Twitter that he's old.
no, old school. He's not. He's probably
Old.
he's younger than me, I think. But no, he was great in terms of helping me find a voice, find like a style for Field Goals. And you know, he obviously he was one of the first guys in the beginning to reach out and say, you know, if you need any help, I'm here. And so he ended up becoming one of the you know, one of the guys that was helping me out with different news and things like that. And then from there we started taking on a lot more members of the community, and it became more of a community blog rather than I was running things. And that's kind of how I wanted it to be anyway.
Right.
So it's definitely like, you know, the term that I've always really thought like tells the story is it's a peer-reviewed football journal. You know, it's a bunch of guys who know their football, writing analysis based on what they're seeing, and you know, there's no overarching agenda. It's just mostly trying to get smarter about football, I think, and that's kind of the main thing.
Right.
And, you know, we don't even talk about Seahawks sometimes. It's just general football stuff.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that one of the biggest things that impacted me early on was just when I submitted This Week in Defense to you, and I was like so nervous. But a lot of people have come to me and they say, it's so polished. How did you ever come up with that stuff? It took 5 years of submitting it to, you know, a backwater forum where people basically early on tore it to shreds and is just like, this doesn't make sense. Like, even if you know, I followed what you said here, this, you know, this content, chop this out. It's like, it was brutal. And so when I came to you 5 years later with the one Atlanta game, where I finally felt confident in it, and a lot of people were just confused. They were like, what went wrong? That game was so bad for the defense in the first half. And I was like, this is my chance. You know, but the thing that I always made clear, and that I hope people understand about blogging, is just because you blog doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
And as long as you go in with that attitude, you can take any kind of criticism as long as it's good.
Yeah. Constructive.
So that's always been the most helpful thing for me to carry. So we've kind of got through my last question, which was what was the hardest thing to learn, and I think, you know, criticism was your thing that you said was the hardest. What was the easiest thing for you to do, you know, coming in or building the community as you saw it going forward? What was the easiest thing, or something you thought would be hard that wound up being a pleasant surprise?
Well, one thing, honestly, was finding people that were interested in writing. I think that turned out to be easier than I thought. And that just, I think that's like a testament to Field Goals community. You know, that goes back to John Morgan and the sort of analytical perspective that he developed and fostered there. I think when I came, there were definitely a lot of guys that knew their stuff and wanted to write, and so it made building a community and building like a strong writing team. It made it relatively easy. It wasn't easy by any means, but it was. There was just a lot of people at the site already that knew what they were talking about, and so I think recruiting guys that wanted to talk and write about football was one of the easier things. And then, not easy, but I guess it wasn't as hard as I had feared.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in terms of when you say easy, I think the easiest thing for me in that time was being interested enough to do it, because it's a very like time-intensive process to run a blog. I don't really think people realize how like incredibly it takes so much time to run a blog. Like, I literally do it probably 10 hours every day.
I could show them the string of emails when I was writing, what was it, the one where I was talking about the 3-technique tackle or something like that, and I was showing how that impacted the pass rush. I remember that because I sent you like 12 emails in a row. Like, does this work? And then you'd give me feedback, then I'd send you another email, then I'd send you this. It's like, I don't know how you do it, because if you're getting any of what I'm giving you from other people that write, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, and it's been. I mean, you have to kind of. I have to right now. I have to balance like a lot of things because I have another job too that I do. It's not a full-time job by any means. It's pretty. I would say I put in about 10 hours a week at that other job, but I have to balance being an editor, being a guy that now I don't have to do as much, thankfully, but I used to have to like do all the digital work, like make GIFs and things, and that took a long time.
Right.
So and that was a big part of our sort of shtick, and so I definitely was happy to do that because it differentiated us. But it did take a long time to make GIFs but now I thank God every time for like Vines and now people know how to make their own videos and things because it just
it allows you to kind of step away from that. Because when you said you needed to get away from the GIFs that they took a long time to make, and then I found Jennifer and I talked with her, and she's saying it can take an hour just to make one. I'm like, what the hell is Danny doing so much work for me? Like, the whole idea was for people to analyze this on their own. And
I mean, I don't know if it took an hour. The ones that I was making, she definitely has hers are very technical and awesome.
Yeah.
So, but in general, it does take a lot of time you have to go through the video first of all and find what play you want. Then you have to capture the video, add it to like a Photoshop, and then edit in and add captions and things like that. It's a time-intensive process, and so that was something that I used to take tons and tons of time to do. But now, thankfully, I've kind of delegated that, and we've found people that are willing to donate their time, and that's awesome.
Yeah. I loved it. That's why I love being able to thank her every week. It's like she deserves all the credit in the world, but anybody that contributes their time in that vein, where it's like that is so any kind of video editing at all is labor intensive. I never understood that, and I can't imagine somebody that has to edit a James Cameron 3-hour epic.
Yeah.
I just can't. You probably go there with a big bottle of whiskey and probably a revolver with one bullet in there, and you play a game. And if you get through the whole movie, there you go.
Yeah. And so now I've transitioned from trying to balance my time between writing for field goals, editing field goal stuff, and then now I have to worry about doing things like Facebook, updating things at Facebook, and then also obviously writing for SB Nation takes a lot of time.
Right.
So anyone who thinks blogging is like this easy job, I would tell you it's not. It's definitely not as easy as it seems. It's awesome because you can work on something that you're interested in, and that's definitely why I've made it through this far. Is that it's hard work, but at least I'm doing something that I'm interested in. Like, I would much rather spend hours and hours doing something that I have interest in than spending my time doing something that I was soul eating or whatever. So
if you have passion about something, the time seems to fly by. Like,
yeah, exactly.
When I tried to explain to you that TWID takes about 20 hours over 2 days because of how I have to cram it, it's like I didn't want to complain. It's just, in order to do anything else, I would either have to limit some of my, This Week in Defense work, or I would have to do another format when I was first doing the audio snapshots. And people kind of ripped that, and then you were like, you came to my defense.
Oh, God.
But
that annoys the shit out of me. It's like people who ask if...
Can't you just do it another way?
The thing that always gets my goat is when we do podcasts and people are like, can you transcribe this? I'm like, no, that would take 12 hours. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to
just use YouTube subtitles. That'll work awesome.
I'm not transcribing an hour-long conversation. You can listen to it or don't.
No, you can listen to it, while you're at the gym working out, something cool, but
Or not.
I found that you can get at least 200 people listening to a podcast, and that's valuable. It's not 1,000 people that read, This Week in Defense, but the more content you provide, the more avenues you get to get new people to look at your work.
Yeah. And I've always liked doing a mix of things because,
Yeah.
the old saying, you can't please everyone all the time. Like, there's nothing more true. There's nothing more true in blogging than that. Like, someone will complain about literally everything you do.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you just have to kind of like say, that's fine. You know what? This isn't for you. That's great. Move on.
Right.
You can't really do anything about that. But yeah, in general, like, one of the main reasons I love blogging is because you get so much good feedback. You get so many people saying it enriches their fanhood or whatever, and it helps them learn about. So, like, I'm kind of complaining about, people who complain, but the overwhelming majority is, like, really great feedback. And that, like, honestly, that's, like, what the main motivation for me is, that, like, people find that it makes it I guess it enriches their fan experience. Like, if if that's what my writing does, and that's, like, exactly what I'm going for.
It allows them to recognize something and not go, well, fire whoever because that play sucked. Because now they recognize, why a play didn't work or what happened on something, and it's a little easier to take because that was why I got involved, was because I was tired of having the same circular arguments, You know what I mean? It's like, that guy sucks. That guy sucks. Why does Kelly Jennings exist?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, there's probably a reason, but I can't name it right now.
Yeah,
but,
I'm going to get back to you about that.
But
I mean, that's why I got into I think that's why I feel that I'm good at explaining X's and O's, is that I came into it totally naive and, like, not knowing what the hell I was talking about. So I've been
researching
there. I've been there in terms of I have, like, I'll read something and not know what the heck these people are talking about. So it's not like I started out blogging as, like, a former player who knew the jargon and knew everything down pat. Like, I had to learn that stuff, and then now, I mean, and honestly, like, some of the most learning I've done, or, like, the best learning I've done is writing. So, like, you'll, like, take a play and watch it 50 million times in a row because you're trying to make the GIF, and then you're like, holy crap, this is what's going on. You really have to, like, honestly watch every play, like, 10 times to really get, like, what everybody's doing, because you can't watch everybody at the same time.
That's what I tell people that want to analyze football. They think of the whole picture of 22 players. You can't watch it that way. You have to start with one section, then build out the next section, then build out the next section. So it means you probably, in order to write about a play, you probably need to watch it about 20 times.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, making myself, I essentially had no choice when I'm making these GIFs and making, adding annotations to these GIFs. It's like, that's when you, like, really, it's like you start to understand what's going on here. Is, like, all these things happening in a chaotic football play, and then when you watch it a whole bunch of times in a row, you finally start to, like, it's like the Matrix, it finally starts to make some sense.
It's the most incredible chess match I've ever been able to watch, like, of any sport. Yeah,
and so now when I watch, like, live football, like, it's a little easier for me to, like, recognize things, and like, watching it live is so much more interesting to me now that I know some of this background on, like, how formations and plays and everything work. And that's kind of hope. That's my hope in terms of what people have learned from reading some of the stuff that we've done, is that they can watch the game and, like, say, hey, it's a cover 3. They're, Cam is doing this, that, or the other. Like, this is why it's working, and that, like, enriches their fan experience. That makes it more interesting. It helps them look cool to their friends.
Right.
Things like that. Like that's like why I like doing it, and that's like why I
Exactly.
like this career. And so I don't mean to complain about the people who are bitching in the comments, because that's definitely the vast majority of people are very like gracious and supportive and awesome in the comments and on Twitter and all that. So it's but that vocal minority is hard to ignore at times.
It sometimes is. If they get you on a bad day and you're just like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Today, of all days, I'm not doing so great, guys.
That was me yesterday. For some reason, I was really annoyed yesterday with everything. But,
So, before I let you go, of course, you were able to go to the Combine this year.
yeah.
What was that like?
It was really interesting. It's a different point of view, because it was college players who at that point in time I hadn't dedicated as much time to studying college prospects as I had. Like I've definitely caught up with that somewhat since then, but kind of went in a little bit blind, and so that it was a little interesting to try and figure out who everyone was, and figure out like what I wanted to gather in terms of interviews and things like that. But essentially, you go there, you go to the Combine, you're set up in a media area, and they cycle players and coaches and GMs through, and they basically either have a press conference or they sit down at tables and you can interview guys, depending on how big of a bigwig these people are. So all the GMs, for instance, and all the coaches just hold press conferences, and then some of the players hold press conferences, like the big name guys, first rounders.
Especially players that have big stories coming in.
Right. Yeah. So like for instance, like Devin Funchess, he's a guy that goes to the podium. Todd Gurley goes to the podium. Then some of the mid-round guys that aren't as don't have as strong of name recognition, you can sit down with them at tables and chat them up. And so I tried to do a lot of both of that, and so so that was great. And then just in terms of going to the Combine really is just like a big networking, like literally like the vast majority of the time I spent just trying to like meet as many of these guys that I've talked to on Twitter and put a face with name and
Is that where you had a drink with Pete Prisco?
Exactly, yeah. So there was a lot of that going. Like I ended up meeting a lot of people that I talked to on Twitter, and so it was cool in that sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of people tell me networking is about having a drink with people.
Yeah.
I don't know if my liver can take that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of industries, I think it's pretty common. Like in pretty much every industry, it's like the social lubrication is important. You have to like go out and have drinks and
pretty much.
And that's pretty much like I feel like business is run on alcohol.
You know what? That's great, because that's very true. I mean, anybody that I've had that have been friends that the bulk of what they do has to do with networking. Like they pretty much talk about drinking and and all that, and you're just like, why do you have to do that? But then that makes sense. That makes sense,
Yeah. So that was kind of what we did every evening, kind of try to go out and network and meet people, and it was great. It was just a lot of fun doing that.
So did you meet any of the other like SB Nation bloggers, or was it just you?
Yeah, so I met Dan Kadar and Tex Western, the guy from he runs the Packers blog, and Ryan Van Bibber, who used to run the Rams blog, and now he's actually my editor for NFL. So yeah, so it was great. It was a lot of fun, and got to kind of just do the media thing, and that was cool.
Wow, so you feel all important now. I can hear it in your voice. I went to the Combine. I am in the lead seat. So I'm imagining that your busiest day of the year is coming up, or your busiest week of the year is coming up when the draft hits.
Yeah, the draft is insane. That is, it used to be just one day, but now it's seriously 3 days straight. It's like 72 hours of writing. Not really, but like it's it's one of the more grueling parts of the year, honestly. I think last year I was pretty much sitting at my desk writing the whole weekend, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So like
I'm not surprised.
Dusk till dawn. So
yeah.
But it's a lot of fun too. Obviously, I love the draft. I love how all these players that you've been watching for the last however long you've been studying the year.
Yeah.
They get to go to these new teams, and there's just so much to analyze and so much exciting information to like process that it's not. A lot of the time, it doesn't even feel like work because it's like so exciting.
Yeah.
But it definitely is. It's a grueling couple of days.
Or it isn't exciting because my favorite player out of that draft last year was HaHa Clinton Dix, and when he went to the Packers, I was a sad panda.
I know, it always is. Like, it's crazy when you see guys that you like go off the board. It's like you lost a friend.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, thank you, Danny, for your time. I think we'll wrap it up, and this should be up in the next few days.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for the time. Later.
Later.
Ball is down. Johnson's kick. He's got distance. Give me three. It's all